Hey, everybody. On the Run with Beards and Dunn, back again. Beards, 2 weeks in a row you've made it for the podcast. I'm so excited. How
about that?
How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm on a roll. Well, pretty good, Dunn. I went to my orthopedic surgeon on Wednesday, and they took off all the bandage, and he likes how it's healing, and they put that same back bandage on there that kind of sucks all the bad stuff out of there for at least another week. And now, as soon as we're done recording our podcast, I'm heading to see the infectious disease doctor, and hopefully this pick line I got in my arm still will be able to take out, and I won't have to give myself any more of those heavy-duty IV antibiotics anymore. So we'll see.
Right. So for anybody who hasn't been listening to these episodes, Dick's left knee, is it?
Yes.
It's been replaced twice, so he's got hardware in there. And somehow or another, it's a nasty infection called MRSA. It's resistant to antibiotics, so you really don't want it. But Beard's got it in his knee, and so he's hopefully getting on the mend. And it sounds like things are kind of turned around, heading in the right direction.
Yeah. So
you're still fishing?
Done. So the day I got out of the hospital, the next day I've been on the water guiding every single day. So
I see your fishing posts on Facebook and stuff. I know you're doing good because you look like you're having a good time.
Oh yeah, and I can't believe now we're on the backside of August already.
I know.
Unreal.
The summers just flew by.
Oh,
like they do.
Crazy.
I wish winter flew by quite as fast as summer does.
Don't listen, buddy.
Sorry.
Living in New Bern, North Carolina, I wish the winter would fly by. Come up here in the Bemidji where it's 40 below for 5 weeks in a row.
We get down to 40 degrees, and it's just nasty up here. It's just nasty.
Oh, that's funny.
So, okay, let's kind of catch up. It's been fun, Beards. I can't believe, when we talk about our running careers, you'd like to think, well, we could knock that out in about half hour, 45 minutes, but we haven't even got to 1982 yet, and that's kind of a banner year, and I think most people know why. And so our podcasts up to now have kind of led us up through 1981, which was just off the charts. I ran my PR in early 81 for the marathon and 10 miles and what have you. Unfortunately, I got injured, which is kind of the story of a lot of runners' lives. And you, though, were on the roll of just setting PR after PR, and you ran 209 at Grandma's, and then you went and you got a pretty good payday and went to Stockholm and ran with Bill Rogers, finished second. And then you had, I hate to call it an accident, but these dogs knocked you to the ground, injured your low back, and didn't take you out of running, but definitely didn't help your running. You had to miss a marathon that fall. You tried racing a little bit. I think you mentioned a 25K that you didn't run real well at. And then you kind of put the clamps on 1981 and said, that's it. I need to take a little recovery.
Yeah, I would call it that. Instead of running 130, 140 miles a week, I was probably running like 90 to 100 or something like that.
Piece of cake for you. So this is now the fall. Like we're talking November into December. And so the weather in Minnesota, Rush City, it's got to start snowing up there.
Oh, for sure. And snow came early that year, and we got a lot of it. But I always liked training in the wintertime for a couple of reasons. I like that, and the cold never bothered me. But what it enabled me to do, so basically, Dunn, I took the last part of November, all of December, January, and all of February, and I just put on the miles. And
no speed work.
No, I didn't. Never. The only time I would do anything like that is once a week. I would try to find a dry part of a road I was running on, and I would do some fartlek once a week just to keep my legs turned over, and kind of. But otherwise, I was just putting on a lot of long, steady miles. If the roads were a little bit better, I might do a little bit of light fartlek other than the one day I for sure pick out. But it just got me really, really strong. And then once the weather broke, or when I went down south to train for a bit, my body was able to handle the hard, fast stuff again.
That's what I kind of, and I got to admit, Beards, as far as here in my relationship, when I've kind of fell off with injuries, and I was working at Athletic Attic, and that fall of 81, I actually coached the Augustana cross country team that fall.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, the athletic director, and his name escapes me right now. I was working over at Athletic Attic, and I knew him, and he knew me from when I ran for South Dakota State and stuff. And they were kind of between a rock and a hard place. Whoever had been coaching their cross country team had left or whatever. And I remember he approached me and he said, Mike, we got, to stay in the North Central Conference, we have to be able to field like 8 sports.
Right.
That's the requirement to be in the conference. So they had to have a cross country team to be one of the sports. They didn't really recruit for cross country at all. Everybody was pretty much a walk on. They had one decent kid. His name was Scott Peterson, and Scott was a really outstanding high school runner at Brandon Valley High School and was coached by Lyle Clausen, a real good friend of mine. And he had elected to go to Augustana, I think more for the academics.
Sure.
It was a really great, really strong school for that. And also he loved running and to run in the North Central Conference. So Scott was going to be a freshman on the team that year. And then I inherited like 4 or 5 guys that were just loved running. They just loved running. And I remember they paid me $500.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was big money. And so I just did it. And I said, well, I can do it. But I was used to the coach like Jay Dirksen and Scott Underwood that was there every day.
Right.
Workouts. And he said, well, it's really, you can do your own schedule. I said, well, I'll meet with the guys 3 days a week, kind of their harder days. And then the days in between, they're just going to do recovery runs or whatever.
Sure.
And these guys, bless their hearts, I don't know if they did any recovery runs, to be honest with you. And morning runs, I think I might have suggested it. And I don't know if anybody of them ever did it, but we actually did have a cross-country team and took them to some meets, and it was a lot of fun. But I know you were kind of off. I don't remember us really communicating a heck of a lot. I know that you and I hooked up when they had the national meet. I think it was in St. Cloud. And you and I went up there to watch. It was during a blizzard.
Yeah.
And you were out there. And I remember we had parkas on. And I didn't have any athletes that made it to the Division II. Our team didn't have a chance.
Right.
And I remember meeting up with you then. And so I don't really recall, a lot of the timelines. But somehow or another, you and Coach Bill Squires, when did Boston, I know you ran Houston because you ran January of 81. You finished second to Rogers at Houston.
Yep.
And I remember you were going to go back to Houston in early 82.
Yes.
And how did that all, what was between, let's say, December to Houston Marathon in early 82?
Yeah. So just getting ready for Boston. So Coach Squires and I had decided probably late summer of 81 that we would run Boston. I would run Boston, but he didn't. I didn't really say much to anybody, and Coach Squires didn't either until about the December 1st. I think I kind of started spilling the beans and about I was going to run Boston, and so literally then done every race I ran, it was all about getting ready for Boston in 1982. So again, all December I'm putting on a lot of high miles. I go down. Let's see. I run Houston in January, and I was the bridesmaid once again 2 years in a row. And this time, Benji Durden. And for those of you who don't know who Benji was a top-notch runner, made the 80 Olympic team, even though it was boycotted. And I raced Benji.
You ran 209, I know, eventually.
Yeah,
in
1983 when you ran 218.
Yeah. Nothing to be ashamed about getting beat by Benji Durden.
No. So I ran Houston, finished second to Benji, came back, and then around the 1st of February, Coach Squires says, Dickie, we got to get you somewhere where there's a lot of hills because, where I live around here in Minnesota, it's just not very hilly. So Coach calls up. He goes, Atlanta's got a lot of ups and downs and stuff. And I don't know if that I'd ever even been to Atlanta at that point in my life. And so he called the Atlanta Track Club president. It's a huge, track club down there. And he says, hey, you guys got anybody that could host one of my athletes for 2-3 months and blah, blah, blah. Well, a guy named Mike D'Imperio, he was a bachelor at the time, had a 2-room condo, just outside of downtown. And so I flew down there, never met the guy in my life. He picked me up at the airport, and I stayed at his condo. And in fact, we became such good friends. I actually was in his wedding a few years later and stuff.
He's a Mike. What,
yeah.
Come on.
So I moved down there and stayed there, and Mary was coming back and forth, I think. She was down there most of the time, but she kind of went back and forth between there and back in Minnesota. Well, I'm out running one day, and when I first got there, and I run into I see this guy running on the roads. I thought, gosh, the guy looks fit. And we were going, I was going one way, he was going the other. And I can't remember if it was Dean or me that turned around. But anyhow, we stopped and he told me who he was. And, of course, I'd known of Dean. He was like a 2:15 marathoner at the time.
Dean Matthews.
And Dean lived just down the hill from Mike DePirio in some apartments. So, we started training together. Like, we'd probably run together about at least three times a week. And that was really beneficial, Well,
he could kind of match up with you, couldn't he?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
yeah. And, the few times that Coach would have me go to the track, and there was this private school, but they had a track that was open to the public that was like a mile from where I was staying. And so a lot of times Coach would have us do a particular type of workout, and then we'd finish on the track, and he'd want us to time a fast last mile, on a track. So Dean and Dean was basically following my workouts that Coach Squires was giving me.
Well, I was wondering, did Dean have a coach, or he was self-coached?
Yeah, he was just self-coached, and but then kind of Coach Squires took him under his wings, and then Dean decided, well, heck, I'm going to run Boston too.
Good idea.
So now we both had the same goal. We were, both going to Boston.
So your workouts kind of could parallel each other.
Yeah. And I tell you, down in Atlanta, it was a perfect place to go train to get ready for Boston, because you're either going up a hill or you're going down a hill. And one day a week, where I was staying was real close to a park at the Chattahoochee River. And I could run 2 miles one way and turn around 2 miles back, but it was nice and flat. So once a week, I would do one of my runs on that flat area just to kind of give my legs a little bit of a rest.
Yeah, give them off the hills.
So
we're
done.
talking February and March, because the Boston's going to be April
19th.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm down there for about 2.5 months. So I'm down there, and I thought, okay, I need to do something else to just, toughen me up a little bit. So after I'd been down there for a few days, I remember after my second workout of the day done, I would take my fists and pound my quads upwards of over 1,000 times a day as hard as I could. I'm thinking, okay, I know nobody else is doing this, and I'm thinking, well, it's got to toughen them up a little bit.
I haven't seen any research on that one.
to handle those downhills, and whether it did or not, in my mind, I thought it was working, And then, Dan, I don't know if you remember this, but I always in the evening after my workouts, usually by myself, I just like this alone time. I'd go out for a little half-hour walk or something.
Always, you did always.
Yeah, and so I started doing that down there at this condo, and there was this little trail that led in through this woods that I kind of walked on. Well, one of the first times I'm walking on it, I stumbled, and this rock kind of turned over, and I walked back, and it was this almost perfectly round rock, and I don't know if my foot caused it or what, but there was this V, like that was not part of the rock. So it was a round rock, and then it looked like there was a V in there. So every day, and in my goofy mind, I'm thinking, V, that means victory. Every day on my walk, I'd stop at that rock and put my left foot in the V, my left toe, front of my shoe in the V, and my right foot in front of the V. It was just...
So it kind of reminds me of the 209 mile marker.
Right.
The 902 hotel room.
Yeah.
So you're looking for those positive affirmations.
Well, and...
keeping your mind in a positive direction.
Yeah. And, I do little goofy stuff like that, and it just, what I did? It just kind of, I don't know. It just kind of calmed me down a little bit
Yeah.
and everything. So then, 6 weeks before Boston, I fly to Osaka, Japan for this big 30K road race.
So how'd that come about? Did they call you up, call coach, or?
No, I remember Coach and I were talking, and I know a number of New Balance athletes, and Bill Rogers had gone over there before and ran this race. And so Coach and I were talking. He goes, Dickie, 6 weeks out, it would be a perfect tune-up for Boston. So Coach contacts the Japanese Athletic Federation, and, they didn't even blink. They said, we'd love to have him in our race. So, that's a long flight from the East Coast all the way to Japan. And I got going over on the flight. It took like 18 hours in the air. And I started getting sick. And I get to my hotel, and, I am stuffed up. I'm hacking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they take me out of my room, and getting up in the morning to try to go out for a little run. I shouldn't have, but I did. And I remember trying to get all this crap out of my chest. I remember closing the bathroom door and turning on the shower as hot as it would go and fill the room up with steam. And so anyhow, long story short, the race started, and I think I was wearing bib number 1 even. And at about 10K, I just could not breathe anymore, and I dropped out.
It was a 30K race, which is like 18 plus miles.
Yes.
And so you had only gone about a third of the way, but what did they diagnose you with, pneumonia, or what was it?
Well,
Bronchitis?
So I drop out, and I'm bummed. I'm 6 weeks out,
bad.
Yeah. And I felt terrible. I fly back, and Coach has me go right away, right to a doctor. And so I go to this doctor, and man, they're taking x-rays and stuff, and he goes, you can't even think about running anymore for a while. You've got an enlarged heart. And so I'm like, what the heck? So I call Coach. I go, Coach, I went to this doc. He says I can't run anymore because I've got an enlarged heart. And Coach, you could just hear him. Of course you got a large heart. You're a runner. So
I love it.
They gave me some kind of shot, antibiotic or something. And so Coach, he says, you're going to still keep running, but he says, we're only going to have you run once a day, not twice a day, and no more than 10 miles at a crack. So I did that for 10 days, started feeling better, and then it was about 2 weeks out before Boston. There was a big 10K race in Atlanta called the Heart Trek 10K on a really super hilly course. So I ran that, and I ran on a hilly course. I ran 29:12 and won the race. And Dean Matthews finished second, and Benji Durden finished third.
I think if you go to YouTube and type in that title, I know I've seen a YouTube video of the race. Some footage.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I'll have to do that.
I'll put it on our. I'll put it on our website. I'll link it.
Yes,
in.
please do, Mikey.
There's some great shots of you. You got your gloves on. I remember you were wearing.
Oh yeah,
gloves.
it was chilly that morning.
It was.
I remember.
So I remember, and so kind of backing up here. I can only imagine when you dropped out in Japan, you're flying home, feeling. I've dropped out of a race or 2 or 3 in my life, and you beat yourself up. You always kind of feel like it's your own fault.
You do.
When you're sick or injured, you can only do your best, and you did your best. It wasn't very good, but you can't blame anything, but it is hard not to do that. But then the self-doubt pops in, because here you are, 6 weeks before Boston, you're thinking,
yes,
wow, my Boston, it could be in jeopardy. I'm not going to be as fit because I've got this big, drop in train. You know what, though?
Right.
Silver lining, dark cloud.
Done.
I know. We're going to get to that.
Done.
But before
Go
that,
ahead.
there was another race. I don't know if you remember. Did you go and do a race like in Tennessee or something?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell that story. What was that all about?
It was on March 21st, so it was basically 1 month before the Boston Marathon.
Okay.
So we went and visited my sister in North Carolina, and then we thought, well, let's go. Mary and I were both country music fans. I still am, And we thought, well, let's go up to Nashville for my birthday, and we'll go to the Grand Ole Opry and stuff. So we get up there, and I was supposed to do, like on this Sunday morning, like a hard 12 to 14 mile kind of up-tempo run. Well, I happened to we were walking around, I saw this sign for this race. I wish I could think of the name of the park, but this course, it is hilly. Let me tell you. I thought, well, heck, I'll just run that. It's on lots of hills, and there'll be other people there, and I'll just wear my training shoes. And so I drive there on the morning of the race, and I thought, man, I'm not signing up as me. Not that I was a super famous runner, but, I was pretty well known amongst the running community, and I thought I didn't want to have any big fanfare or anything like that.
Right.
So I signed up as Ed Hausmann. Well, that was Mary's dad. and
so you
from
used
Bonesteel, South Dakota.
Okay, false name.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, kind of false. I mean, it was a real name,
man,
and I knew Ed, obviously.
He's a good guy.
And so, anyhow, I run this. I think it was like an 11-point-something mile on this hilly course, and I won it. In fact, the course record, I set the course record back then, and it still stands. So I got done, and stupidly, I should have just gotten my car and drove back to the hotel, but I thought, well, I'll stick around for the awards ceremony. So they're going through the awards, and they go, and the overall winner setting a new course record from Bonesteel, South Dakota, Ed Hausmann. So I walk up on the stage, and there are like 2 or 3 people going, Ed Hausmann? That's Dick Beardsley. Oh, God, you talk about being embarrassed.
So did it kind of ripple through the crowd or what?
Yes. It rippled through the crowd, and nobody was upset about it. I mean, and once the cat was out of the bag, I explained why I was doing it and stuff, and everybody got a pretty good giggle out of it.
It's like, I love that story because it's kind of like these movie stars will check into hotels and use fictitious names.
Right.
So, that way the work people at the hotel or other guests aren't like clamoring to wait outside their door or something like that.
Exactly. And
so Ed's a hell of a runner.
Oh my gosh. I tell you, thanks for bringing that up, Don, because I kind of forgot about that one.
Did you give Ed the award after?
I did. I remember I got a trophy, and I remember giving it to him and stuff. We went to visit him.
Ed won it. But,
oh yeah, Ed was a good guy. He got a good kick out of that and stuff. So then we went back, and so about 10 days
there you go
before Boston, Coach says, Dickie, we're flying you up to Boston. You're going to stay with me. He says, I want to get you on the course in some different areas so I can kind of show you how to run it, because I'd never run Boston before.
Right.
So I fly into Boston, and Coach picks me up, and I'm going to just stay at his house. So we get to his house that night, and back then I was training hard, and the old oven was burning all the time, and so Coach goes, now Dickie, if you get hungry, just anything in the fridge is yours. You can, just eat what you find. And so I say, oh, thanks, Coach. I go to bed that night, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm starving.
Well, Beard, you had a reputation of getting up in the middle of the night and going to get a big honking bowl of cereal.
Yes.
And you'd be out there munching cereal.
Oh.
And you go back to bed.
Right. I was just starving. So I'm about 1:30. I'm starving. So I get up and well, Coach, I could have anything in the fridge. So I open the refrigerator door. The only thing in there is a half a jar of pickles. That's it. There wasn't milk. There wasn't cheese, apple, nothing. It was a half a gosh dang jar of pickles. So I ate the whole jar of pickles at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Coach was a bachelor, I guess.
He was. So I go back to bed. And when I got up that night, that early morning, man, the wind was howling. I look out the window, and it's like snowing to beat the band. Oh. So I go back to bed, and I wake up the next morning, and, man, it's still going. They're having a nor'easter, one of those infamous blizzards they get out there. And the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour out of the northwest, snow and sleet's coming down sideways, and I look out, and Coach's car is literally buried under a snowdrift. So my workout that morning was to run Heartbreak Hill up one side, down the other 8 times.
Okay.
And so Coach gets up and he sees the weather. He says, Dickie, there's no way that we can, you can do that workout. I said, Coach, I'm doing the workout. And he goes, well, my car is buried. I go, you got a shovel? Yeah. Well, tell me where it is. And I went out and I grabbed the shovel. Out in this blizzard, I'm shoveling out his car so we can get it out onto the street. So Coach and I hop in, and Coach is just shaking his head like, what the heck am I doing with this athlete of mine? So we get about 3 miles from Heartbreak Hill. And Coach can't go anymore. There's between traffic and all the snow and the plows trying to get roads open up. I said, Coach, I'll jump out here. And I can't even remember where I told him I'd meet him, but we met somewhere. But so I slogged through the deep snow, get over to Heartbreak Hill. And so I started on the back side of it. So I'm actually, my first time up, I'm going the opposite direction of the way you run the marathon. And it was blowing and sleeting and ice pellets and snowing so hard. I had to run with my head down and my eyes shut. And I went up that hill, down the other side, back up, back down. I did that 8 times. Now, could I do it the way I wanted to do it? Are you kidding? I'm slogging through 2 feet of snow. But here's that whole mental thing. I knew Bill Rogers was in Arizona training. I knew Salazar, and there was rumor at that point that he was running. Well, at that point, he already said he was out in Oregon training. 10K, and I thought, and I thought, nobody is doing what I'm doing this morning. And again, I couldn't run it like I wanted to, but just that getting out there in that blizzard and doing it really was a huge thing for me mentally to get ready for Boston.
Well, the satisfaction you got from being out there doing it when, like you said, Salazar was running against Henry Rono a week before Boston.
10 days
10K
before.
on the track. And so, he was doing his speed. That's a pretty good workout a week before a marathon, do a hard 10K. You were slogging up and down Heartbreak Hill in a blizzard.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And so done the next morning then. Or maybe even later that day, Coach says, Dickie, we got to get you the HELL out of here. So they put me on a plane and I flew back to Atlanta. In fact, I know that's what I did because I got back, I flew into Atlanta airport, and I thought, and I went and did a 13-mile run from the airport. And it felt so good to just have shorts and singlet on.
What was the weather like in Atlanta?
Oh,
nice.
It was like it was really like 70, and done. It was that late afternoon, early evening after I did that Heartbreak Hill workout, and I was able to get out of Boston. And I remember I had this bounce in my step, and I'm thinking, oh dang, and done. I look back. Probably one of the best things that happened to me was me getting sick over in Japan, having to back off my training for a couple of weeks. Because I think I was right at that edge of going over the top and never coming back. And I wouldn't have run near as well.
Yeah. I love that. We always have things happen in our life that we kind of like, it's kind of like.
At the time, you're devastated.
You are, and you can't see any positive outcome from this situation. And we can get into that, in both of our lives, life stories and stuff like that.
Right.
Stuff that happens and you go, I can't imagine why this happened to me. Poor pitiful me. But then down the road somewhere, you have a little new perspective on how things actually end up playing out. I just think that's pretty. I like the thought of when you're out there doing something that's a little off the wall, and you're going, who else?
Right.
Who else is out here doing? Talking about Heartbreak Hill, Beards. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I had heard stories about Heartbreak Hill. I want your opinion. You hear, the famous story is where was it? Tarzan Brown pulled away from Johnny Kelly and broke his heart on that climb in 1956 or so. I can't remember the exact history. And so, it had this reputation, man, Heartbreak Hill can break your race, can break your heart. And then I've talked to runners before I went and ran Boston, and they go, geez, I didn't even notice the darn thing. I guess there was a hill, and you go, well, geez, how could you not notice it? And so I had never been on the course, and at least, like you said, you had never been on the course. And so
right.
I kind of think it was a great idea for you to go out there and at least kind of see what it's like, even though it was during a blizzard. But, I'm going to be honest. I remember in my race, it's a year later, but I ran a 5:56 from 20 to 21. I think Heartbreak Hill's in that spread there. Maybe it's 19 to 20. I can't remember the exact.
No, 20, 21.
20 to 21. And they, I had a chronograph watch, and they had those mile markers pretty well marked out in Boston. And I remember I was hurting unit. I was running with a friend, and he pulled away from me on Heartbreak Hill. It was breaking my heart. I read a few years later, I think when Greg Meyer or somebody, one of the Boston ran and they said, oh, he ran a 5:06 up Heartbreak Hill. I would give anything, and there's no way of knowing what you and Alberto Salazar probably ran that 20 to, or do you have any concept whatsoever?
Well,
what do you think about Heartbreak Hill?
Well, at that point, in a race, stepping up on a curb seems like a mountain, when you're bashing your way like that. But for me, it was the crowds when I ran that day were so huge, and it was just Salazar and I, And now let me back up for a second. Are we going to be talking the whole race next week's podcast? I
guess I jumped in. I kind of, when you started talking about Heartbreak Hill, it made me kind of think about that. Just one piece of the race. Let's save the race.
Yeah, let's save that. But I know this. They said from 17 to 21 miles when you make that right-hand turn. So back then, they had records for certain checkpoints from town to town, segments. And I know Salazar and I ran that 4-mile stretch 2 minutes faster than anybody had ever run it before.
I think I remember it was in the low 17:30. And so when you do the math, 4-minute miles would be 16 minutes. Well, obviously you're not doing 4-minute miles, but if you're doing 4:30 miles,
we were hauling.
That would be 18 minutes.
Yeah, it was 18
you guys
something.
Did sub 18, and so for that stretch, there was some flat, and there might have been some down in there.
Oh yeah,
but there was also
because every hill you went up.
Series,
Oh yeah, every hill you went up, there was a little downhill on the backside.
Yeah,
but done. And we'll get into that next week when we go into Boston. But I got to back up a little bit. So when Coach had me, out on the course, and I came back up to Boston, about a week before the race itself, and the weather was better then. And so Coach, he had me running different segments. And I can't remember what mile point. It was before halfway, and we're on a kind of going down a slight hill, and Coach pulls his car over, and he goes, now Dickie, and he has a tennis ball in his hand, and he opens his car door and he drops it, and it starts rolling down the hill. He goes, you follow that tennis ball right now exactly how it goes down this hill, and on race day, that's the exact way I want you to run this segment of the course. So, of course, I did that.
So and taking advantage of the best possible descent.
Yeah.
Huh.
And I'll never forget that. Coach was, you knew Coach. He was a little off the wall just like me, so that's why we got to get along so well.
We've got a few extra minutes, and we're going to save Boston. That's going to be our next podcast. But, Coach Squires, I have a personal story about Coach. He, after Boston, and I can't remember how it came about, but I was in Rapid City teaching in 1984, and the Black Hills Marathon, and I was fortunate enough to have won that race twice, and they wanted to bring in a guest speaker, and you weren't available. I think I had to talk to you in your schedule, or it wasn't possible.
No.
And I said, and I don't know if you brought it up, or I said, I wonder if Coach Squires, and you go, oh heck, let me check with him. And so I was kind of like on the race committee helping out, just doing stuff. And I said, well, they go, see if you can get him. And I said, Coach, and I don't know how. And he said, sure. And we paid him $1,000. I remember. And Coach didn't take a dime for coaching.
No.
That's just, when you think of that, the athletes he coached, Bill Rogers, yourself, he helped with Salazar when he was young, Greg Meyer. All of these guys. You would have, a lot of agents and coaches now, it's like 10, 15, 20%.
That's their living.
Coach was like, he was back in the old school. It was amateur. As a runner, he had to maintain his amateur status. And as a coach, he couldn't take a salary or he'd give up his amateur status, believe it or not.
Right.
Jay Dirksen had to deal with that early in his running coaching career. Lucky the rules have all changed since then. So Coach Squires, we flew him into Rapid City, South Dakota. And I, to save money, I said, well, I'll host him. And Karen and I and our daughters were like 4, 5, and 2.
Oh, there you go.
And we took him up to Nemo. And Dick, you've been to Nemo. It's a guest ranch.
Oh, for sure.
We lived up there in an old house. And Coach spent the day with us. He and I went out for a run. And I tell you, the guy pulled out. I go, Coach, do you want to go for a run? He goes, oh, sure, Mike. And he goes, I don't know if he even he finally found a pair of shoes in his luggage. These suckers were wore out. I almost
That's Coach.
If he would have wore my size shoe, I would have gave him a pair of mine to wear. They were terrible. And he goes, I'm not used to them. I lived at about 5,400 feet elevation. He was coming from Boston. So he said,
right.
You're going to have to take it easy on me. And so I said, oh, Coach, we did like a 3-mile run through the woods, a loop. And that night, I remember we had roast beef. I didn't have a lot of money in those days. I was teaching school.
Right.
But we have a guest, a friend, your coach, and kind of famous guy. And I told Karen, get something good, and so she made us a roast beef. And we ate that roast beef. And the next day was a 10K, like the day before the marathon and the day he spoke at the spaghetti feed and all this stuff. And I ran the 10K and ran terrible. I remember I just didn't. I felt terrible from the start. It was one of those days where I didn't have it. And Coach afterwards, I was kind of embarrassed because I wanted to impress Coach Squires. And he goes, Mike, he said, your mistake was you ate that damn roast beef supper the night before. He goes, you had to digest that food all night long. He said, you might as well have went out and did an 8-mile run last night. And I remember he was serious. And
I bet he
was. And he was
was
kind of like trying to help me out. But, Coach was telling it the way it was. He would have preferred I would have ate some spaghetti or pasta.
Sure.
But since Karen had made this meal and I sat down, I was eating it with him. And
Heck
I always he kind of got on me, but he meant it in a good way. And in a good way. And then as he left, Coach, he left me. I still have it. It's like a handkerchief that says 1983 Helsinki World Championship. It's like he picks up souvenirs.
Oh, he does.
And then he gives them away as gifts.
Yes.
And he signed it. I think he signed it like a napkin.
I'm sure he did.
And I still have this stuff. I should take some photos of it.
Oh, my God.
And that was just a loving guy. He'd give you the shirt off his back, but he wanted to leave something, a tangible piece of something that he was there. And so that was pretty cool. The people
over the years, over the years, then Coach, even after I was all done with running, at that high level and stuff, Coach, anything about fishing, hunting, milking cows, and running, he was a avid reader of newspapers, and he'd cut these little articles out, and then he just when the manila envelope filled up, he'd send it to me. Well, when we were living in the cabin, remember Sam and Spike?
Of course, the dogs.
The dogs, yeah. Well, Coach loved them. Well, this is like years after the two dogs are in, doggy heaven, and Coach he'd send that manila package, and on the outside he'd go, hey, make sure you pet Spike and Sam for me.
They've been gone it's like 12 years after they died.
Oh, yeah. But no, Coach was, I tell you, and, a little over a year ago, he passed away, and I went out, I thought I'm not going to miss his funeral. I mean, I don't care what it costs. I mean, he did so much for me in my running career, and so I remember flying out there, and I didn't even tell anybody I was coming. I got an Uber, and I knew where the funeral was going to be, what church at, and I stayed in a cheap hotel. And I remember walking in there, and I saw Fred Doyle was a good friend of Coach Squires and stuff, and gosh, it was like a who's who of runners that were there. And
the stories, whenever the Coach Squires stories, nobody can mention it. Everybody starts smiling and laughing, and what a endearing legacy. The runners, the teams, but just the experiences that he turned a lot of young boys into young men.
He did. He was one of a kind person, and he was like just a couple of months short of his 90th birthday when he passed away.
We had him at the running camp, and we'll get into that in one of these episodes that
right.
put on a marathon running camp. And it was so much fun, and he brought in a coaching staff of just some really.
And Dunn was part of the coaching staff that we had.
It was such an honor, and we'd bring in a celebrity and Frank Shorter and Joan Benoit, and we got to meet all these Don Cardone,
Bill Rogers,
and Coach Squires is there. And I always remember somebody asked him about a day off. He goes, "Day off, day on." He's like, "There ain't no days off." And I just remember that, and everybody started laughing because. And Coach had fire in his eyes when he said it.
He did. Of all the people we used to bring into the Beardsley races in Detroit Lakes, and they were all wonderful, but there was something about Coach that just captured the spirit of running. He was authentic, and our campers, I think if you polled every camper of all the great people we had come and talk to the campers, Coach Squires would have been voted number one.
I know he did intervals with his team, a lot of mile repeats and stuff, and they were whining to him one time about how short the rest periods were. Like, you do a 4:30 mile, and he'd give him like 30 to 60 seconds.
Right.
And we're going to do another one. And they were kind of whining about it, and he kind of said, "What? In the middle of the race, you're going to pull out a folding chair and sit down and have a popsicle?" Or something. So he'd come up with these like crazy scenarios because in a race you ain't going to get any recovery time, and so you better just learn to use. You're going to have to toughen up, and that's a good coach. Coaches love their athletes, but boy, they got to tough love them too, because if you just kind of it's a delicate balance, and the athletes respect that. They really do. They really respect that.
No,
Beards,
it was
that's I'm getting goosebumps thinking here because I'm already anticipating next time we get together, it's going to be the Beards. I want to hear Boston, April 19th, 1982.
Yes.
The alarm clock goes off. No, probably when did you get into Boston? Where did you stay? What was the media
we'll go
like?
all into
I
that.
know there's some great stories there.
Yes.
And we'll get to them.
Yeah. Or we'll get to them next week. And Dunn, I got to go back to the doctor, but it's hopefully good news this time.
Please do, because if you're not here next week, it's going to be ugly.
And we want to thank everybody for listening. And if you have any questions for Dunn and myself or comments about our show, you can sure contact us directly here at our website, beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, which formerly is Twitter, all at Beards and Dunn Pod. So do that.
I like YouTube because that way you can see our beautiful faces and how serious we are about all of this stuff. But if you go to YouTube, you can always hit the comment and give us some feedback or something you'd like us to visit about. If you enjoy the podcast and interested in supporting us, we got some merchandise. In fact, Beards, I haven't even showed you this.
No.
Look at this.
Nice.
They peel off, and I've got them on all my coffee mugs, all my car travel.
Oh my gosh.
I'll send you some.
Yeah,
I'll
gotta
send you
get
some
of
real
that.
soon. Beards, have a great day. Have a good luck fishing, and say hi to the doctor.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a great weekend, Mikey. Bye-bye.
See you soon.